There was a city so wealthy, its streets gleamed with gold. So powerful, European kings trembled at its name. So advanced, it housed the world's largest library, while Europe burned books. This wasn't a Marvel movie. This was real. And they erased it from history. Until now. If you've been lied to about history, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about Africa, power, and why some stories get buried. Let's uncover the truth together. Picture this. A city where the buildings shine with gold leaf, where scholars debate philosophy in massive universities, where books are worth more than precious gems, and where the king's wealth makes modern billionaires look like beggars. Now imagine that city is in Africa, in the 14th century, at a time when Europeans were still living in squalor, burning witches, and dying from plagues they couldn't understand. Sound impossible? That's exactly what they wanted you to think. The city was Timbuktu. The empire was Mali. And the story of how it rose, dominated, and then disappeared from our history books is one of the greatest cover-ups ever orchestrated. This isn't about Afrocentrism or rewriting history. This is about revealing what was deliberately hidden. Because when you control the past, you control the present. And someone didn't want the world to know that Black Africa once ruled the known world. Let's go back to medieval Europe. Knights, castles, and kingdoms fighting over scraps of land in the taverns and royal courts, travelers told wild stories about a place far to the south, across the Sahara Desert. A place where the streets were literally paved with gold, where the king had so much wealth he couldn't spend it in a lifetime, where knowledge flowed like water and civilization reached heights. Europe couldn't imagine. Most Europeans dismissed these tales as fantasy, the ramblings of desert-mad merchants looking to impress. They were wrong. Every word was true. The Mali Empire stretched across West Africa like a golden giant. At its peak, it covered an area larger than Western Europe. This wasn't some scattered collection of villages. This was an organized, sophisticated empire, with systems of government, law, trade, and education that rivaled or exceeded anything Europe had at the time. The capital region, centered around Timbuktu, became the beating heart of not just Africa, but of the entire medieval world. How did this happen? Geography is destiny, they say, and Mali had won the geographic lottery. The empire sat at the crossroads of the trans-Saharan trade routes, the ancient highways that connected sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Through Mali flowed two resources more valuable than anything else in the medieval world: gold and salt. Yes, salt. In a time before refrigeration, salt preserved food and sustained life. In the scorching Sahara, it was literally worth its weight in gold. And Mali controlled both. The gold came from mines in the southern regions of the empire, not small deposits, but vast reserves that produced approximately 2/3 of the entire world's gold supply. Every gold coin minted in Europe, every piece of jewelry worn by Arab princes, every golden thread in Asian silk, there was a good chance it came from Mali. The empire didn't just have gold, it was drowning in it. And the leaders of Mali knew exactly how to use that power. Enter Mansa Musa, whose name should be as famous as Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great, but somehow isn't taught in schools. Mansa Musa took the throne of Mali in 1312, inheriting an already wealthy empire. But what he did next would become the stuff of legend and change the course of history. In 1324, he decided to make the pilgrimage to Mecca, as was required of devout Muslims. But Mansa Musa didn't travel light. His caravan consisted of 60,000 people. Read that again. 60,000 people crossing the Sahara Desert. There were soldiers, servants, merchants, scholars, and officials. But here's where it gets wild. He brought 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of pure gold. That's 24,000 pounds of gold, just for spending money on a road trip. He had 500 servants, each carrying a golden staff weighing about 4 pounds. Mansa Musa was literally walking around with millions of dollars in today's money. And that was just his travel budget. As the caravan moved through cities like Cairo, Mansa Musa spent gold like it was going out of style. He gave gold to the poor, to scholars, to officials, to anyone who approached him. He bought goods, funded construction projects, and generally spread wealth wherever he went. And here's the crazy part. He spent so much gold that he actually crashed the economy. The sudden flood of gold into Cairo's markets devalued the precious metal for an entire decade. Imagine being so rich that your generosity destroys economies. That was Mansa Musa. Historians and economists have attempted to calculate Mansa Musa's wealth in modern terms. The estimates are staggering. Adjusted for inflation and economic impact, his personal fortune would be worth around $400 billion. That makes him, without question, the wealthiest person who has ever lived. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all the modern billionaires combined, they don't come close. Mansa Musa had more money than some countries have today. And he used it to build something extraordinary. When Mansa Musa returned from Mecca, he brought back architects, scholars, and craftsmen. His mission was clear: transform Mali into the intellectual and cultural center of the world. In Timbuktu, he commissioned the construction of mosques, libraries, and universities that would become legendary. The Sankore University became one of the first true universities in the world, with enrollment reaching 25,000 students at its peak. 25,000 students in the 14th century, studying law, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. Meanwhile, most of Europe was illiterate. The architecture alone was revolutionary. The Great Mosque of Djenné, built with a distinctive Sudano-Sahelian style, stood as a testament to African engineering genius. These weren't primitive mud huts. These were sophisticated structures designed to regulate temperature in the desert heat, built to last centuries, incorporating mathematical principles and architectural knowledge that European builders wouldn't discover for generations. The buildings could withstand earthquakes, floods, and the test of time. Many still stand today, but the real treasure of Timbuktu wasn't gold. It was knowledge. The libraries of Timbuktu housed hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, of manuscripts. These weren't just religious texts. They covered every subject imaginable. Astronomy charts that tracked celestial movements with stunning accuracy, medical texts describing surgical procedures and herbal remedies, mathematical treatises exploring concepts Europeans wouldn't understand for centuries, legal documents outlining complex systems of justice and governance, and literary works of poetry, history, and philosophy. Think about what this means. While Europe was in the Dark Ages, burning books and persecuting scholars, Africa was preserving and advancing human knowledge. Doctors in Timbuktu were performing cataract surgeries. Mathematicians were working on concepts that wouldn't appear in Europe until the Renaissance. Astronomers were mapping the stars with precision. And all of this was being written down, documented, and preserved in libraries that were open to serious students, regardless of their background. The educational system in Mali was revolutionary for its time. Education wasn't reserved for the wealthy elite. Talented students from poor families could rise through merit, and scholarship women, too, had access to education and could become scholars and teachers. The society valued knowledge above almost everything else. A scholar was respected more than a warrior. A rare book could be worth more than a chest of gold. This was a civilization that understood something profound. Knowledge is the ultimate form of power. Trade caravans from across the known world came to Timbuktu. Merchants from Cairo, Baghdad, Venice, and beyond made the dangerous journey across the Sahara because the profit potential was enormous. But they didn't just trade goods, they traded ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. Timbuktu became a melting pot of African, Arab, and even Asian influences. It was cosmopolitan, in the truest sense. A global city centuries before globalization was even a concept. The military might of Mali was equally impressive. The empire maintained a standing army of approximately 100,000 soldiers, with cavalry units that could mobilize quickly to protect the vast trade routes. These weren't disorganized raiders. They were professional soldiers with sophisticated tactics, standardized equipment, and a command structure that would have impressed Roman generals. The army's primary purpose wasn't conquest, but protection. They safeguarded the trade routes, ensured safe passage for merchants, and maintained peace across the empire's vast territories. European powers watched all of this with a mixture of awe and envy. Portuguese explorers who reached West African coasts in the 15th century sent back reports that shocked European monarchs. They described organized kingdoms, wealthy cities, and civilizations that were clearly not primitive or backward. But there was a problem. These African kingdoms were too powerful to conquer directly. They had strong armies, sophisticated defenses, and most importantly, they weren't interested in European trinkets or trade on Europe's terms. This terrified European powers, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't fear of military invasion. Africa had no interest in conquering Europe. It was something far more threatening to the European worldview. Here was undeniable proof that black Africans had built advanced civilizations, that they were equals or superiors in many ways to European societies. This contradicted the emerging narratives that Europeans were beginning to construct about race, about their supposed superiority, about their divine right to rule over others. So, what happened? How did an empire this powerful, this wealthy, this advanced, disappear from history? The decline of Mali was gradual and came from multiple directions. Internal succession disputes weakened central authority. Different regions of the vast empire began asserting independence. Climate change, specifically the shifting patterns of Saharan rainfall, altered trade routes and agricultural productivity. But the killing blow came from outside. In 1591, a Moroccan army equipped with gunpowder weapons invaded from the north. The Mali forces, still relying on traditional weapons, couldn't withstand the firepower. Timbuktu fell. The Moroccan forces, however, weren't interested in governing or preserving the civilization. They wanted gold and anything valuable they could cart away. What followed was catastrophic. Libraries were looted, manuscripts were destroyed or scattered, scholars were killed or fled, and the institutional knowledge that had taken centuries to build was shattered in a matter of years. But the physical destruction was only the beginning. When European colonial powers finally carved up Africa in the 19th century, they found the remnants of these great civilizations, and they faced a choice. They could acknowledge the advanced societies that had existed, or they could rewrite the narrative entirely. They chose the latter. Colonial authorities actively suppressed evidence of African achievement. They attributed architectural wonders to anyone but Africans, claiming Arabs or even aliens must have built them. They burned libraries, looted artifacts, and rewrote history books to present Africa as a dark continent that had achieved nothing before European arrival. This wasn't accidental. This was deliberate cultural genocide. The colonizers understood that if Africans knew their true history, if they understood that their ancestors had built universities while Europeans were illiterate, that their kings had wealth beyond European imagination, that their societies had sophisticated systems of governance and justice, then the entire justification for colonization would collapse. How could Europeans claim they were bringing civilization to Africa when Africa had been civilized for millennia? So they buried the evidence and taught generations of both Africans and Europeans a complete fabrication. Today, most people leave school believing that Africa contributed nothing to human civilization before colonization. They believe Africans lived in primitive conditions, that they had no written language, no architecture, no art, no science, no history worth mentioning. This is one of the most successful propaganda campaigns in human history, and it worked so well that even many Africans themselves believed it. The psychological impact of stolen history cannot be overstated. When people don't know their past, they can't imagine their future. But here's what the colonizers couldn't fully destroy: the manuscripts. Families in Timbuktu hid their precious books, burying them in the desert, sealing them in secret rooms, passing them down through generations with instructions to guard them at all costs. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, these manuscripts began to resurface. Scholars started cataloging them, and what they found was stunning. Hundreds of thousands of manuscripts proving everything the oral histories had claimed: the mathematical advances, the medical knowledge, the astronomical observations, the legal systems. It was all real. It was all documented, and it couldn't be denied anymore. Archaeological evidence has also emerged that confirms the sophistication of West African civilizations. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed city layouts more organized than medieval European cities. Chemical analysis of artifacts has shown advanced metallurgy techniques. Climate data has confirmed the agricultural and economic systems described in historical accounts. Science is slowly forcing the truth back into the light. This is why Black Panther resonated so powerfully with audiences worldwide. Yes, Wakanda is fictional, but it's not fantasy. It's memory. It's a glimpse of what was and what could have been when people saw a technologically advanced African nation that had never been colonized, that had preserved its knowledge and culture. Something stirred in the collective consciousness. That's not impossible. That's history. That's Mali. That's what Africa was before colonization shattered it into pieces. The question we must ask ourselves is this: what did humanity lose when these civilizations were destroyed? What medical breakthroughs died with the scholars of Timbuktu? What mathematical insights were burned with the manuscripts? What philosophies and ideas could have advanced human thought, but were deliberately erased? We talk about the burning of the Library of Alexandria as one of history's greatest tragedies. The destruction of African knowledge was a catastrophe of equal or greater magnitude, yet it barely gets mentioned. Africa today is rising again. From technology hubs in Kenya to financial centers in Nigeria, from renewable energy innovations in Morocco to space programs in South Africa, the continent is reclaiming its place in the world. And increasingly, Africans are reclaiming their history too. They're seeking out the manuscripts, learning the true stories, teaching their children about Mansa Musa and Timbuktu, about the empires and achievements that were stolen from the history books. This matters for everyone, not just Africans. Human history is incomplete without African history. The story of human civilization cannot be told honestly while pretending Africa contributed nothing Every person deserves to know the full truth about our shared past. Because when we understand that greatness has emerged from every corner of the world, from every race and culture, we stop seeing others as inferior. We stop accepting narratives of supremacy. We recognize our common humanity and our collective potential. The real Wakanda existed. It was called Mali. It was glorious, powerful, wealthy beyond imagination, and intellectually advanced beyond its time. They tried to erase it. They failed. The truth is emerging, manuscript by manuscript, discovery by discovery, story by story. And once you know this truth, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to accepting the sanitized, whitewashed version of history they taught in school. You become a keeper of the truth. And that's a responsibility. So what do we do with this knowledge? We share it. We teach it. We refuse to let it be buried again. We ask questions about what else we haven't been told. We demand complete history, not comfortable history. We honor the ancestors who built these civilizations by ensuring their achievements are never forgotten again. Because remembering isn't just about the past. It's about the future. It's about knowing what humans are capable of when given the chance. It's about understanding that greatness isn't owned by any one race or continent. It belongs to humanity. The golden age of Mali fell centuries ago, but its legacy refuses to die. In every student studying the recovered manuscripts, in every architect inspired by Sudano-Sahelian design, in every African child learning about Mansa Musa, the spirit of that empire lives on the real Wakanda existed. And in many ways, it's being rebuilt right now. This is just one story they didn't want you to know. There are hundreds more. If this opened your eyes, smash that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Drop a comment with what shocked you most. And remember, they can bury the history, but they can't bury the truth forever. We're digging it up, one story at a time. See you in the next one.